So it's all going off. So the Chancellor is set to deliver these tax-raising budget. She pledges to push ahead with her biggest drive for growth in a generation.
Well, middle-class families could be hit with a dirty dozen tax rises, as it's been described in the papers, as Labour expands their welfare state.
Rumours of an income tax rise have been quashed. She's looking to freeze tax thresholds for 2 more years to bridge a £30 billion gap in public finances.
Well, let's speak now to the economics expert, Justin Urquhart Stewart, who joins us in the studio now. Morning to you, Justin. What do we know is coming today?
It's a very interesting point, just about anything and everything.
Yeah.
What we know, we can tell you what's not happening, is income taxes are going to go up. Well, actually, the threshold, it will do because of the thresholds being frozen. No, there were all sorts of issues, and you were just going through that list of things like whether it was going to be sugar, fat tax, all sorts of different things. And this is the stupidity of it, because every time chancellors try to go into the detail, they get stuck. And because there are knock-on effects, which they hadn't actually thought about. Do you remember the pasty tax that also had to deal with? And that had to be rowed back. All those little things. As soon as you make it complicated, the knock-on effects just mean you end up looking really rather stupid. She should have gone back and said, keep it simple. Remember, this is the budget you weren't supposed to have, because I wasn't going to come back with any more tax rises. Oh, really? Coming back with a lot of tax rises. So I'm afraid she's going to have a very difficult time of this, not because of the speech, but in 48 hours, when we've all picked our way through the Red Book to actually work out the knock-on effect, to actually see where the holes are and how much then has to be reversed.
I look at things and I do scratch my head. There's a lot of towns and cities around this whole country, in Leeds and Manchester and Belfast and Glasgow, where they're trying to increase hotel accommodation, right? So they're building hotels and whatever. Now she's taxing people staying in hotels. How does one thing encourage the other? I mean, take this sugar tax, for instance. You could argue it's a health move, but then if it puts people off sugar, you don't generate any money. So, it seems desperate.
These sort of sin taxes you're going to have. Remember, there are only 3 main taxes in the country. You've actually got national insurance, you've got VAT, and you've got income tax. Even corporation tax isn't that large. And so everything else after that you can put into the sort of overall sin taxes, and you end up just mucking around with small amounts. So we're going to hear about a mansion tax. When we call that, it'll be something else. But even that, with the figures they're talking about, is only going to bring in a relatively small amount of money. It's not going to solve the underlying problem. Also, she's got her focus in the wrong direction. Instead of what penal issues do we have to have, as opposed to what encouraging issues to grow the economy, i.e. focus on those areas where we know it will have an impact.
But then why wouldn't she have been brave enough to say, I'm going to put income tax up by a penny or 2 pence or whatever?
And the perfect thing she should have done is going back to that old-fashioned economist John Maynard Keynes, who after the Second World War said, when facts change, my views change. What about you? And the facts have changed. So you could turn around and say, when I actually gave my original budget, that's what I was expecting to happen. And now it's completely different. I know it was in the manifesto, but things are different now. But I suspect it's probably the backbenchers saying, our manifesto we must stand by. It's an old document. It's out of date. And so's she, unless she realises actually to focus on the positive issue. Because one word you need coming out of a budget: confidence.
Confidence.
If you can do that, then actually the tax bits sort of go to one side. Confidence that we spend more, that actually companies invest more, and overseas individuals come in.
Let's see if James Price, who's a former political advisor, has confidence in what he's hearing so far, or what indeed James would give you confidence.
Well, good morning. I mean, I'm so unconfident that, like Ellie and Justin here, I'm dressing in red so that Rachel Reeves might think I'm a Labour backbencher and will try and appease me. I'm not sure it's going to work. There have been so much politics going on before all of this. As you say, there is a very bad economic situation, made much worse by the budget that she did last year. And as Justin said, we were never supposed to have this again. Last year was supposed to be so awful and terrible that she'd never have to come back for more tax rises.
Well, those words are going to haunt her today, aren't they?
Well, I think so. I think so.
Using the internet without a VPN, a virtual private network, is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance. All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash. This video's sponsor is Private Internet Access. They are the VPN to help keep you safe. Click the link in the description below to find out why over 30 million people have downloaded PIA to protect themselves online. A virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and helps keep your data private. When you're browsing the internet at home, you give up a large amount of data to businesses, to shops, and indeed to social media giants too. Hackers have the ability to steal your personal data with ease, including sensitive information such as passwords, keystrokes, and even your personal photos. Private internet access helps protect your personal data by encrypting your internet connection to keep your data out of the hands of cyber criminals. And it's not just hackers either to be concerned about. Information can be censored too. When Canada passed their C18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms. But PIA can protect your ability to consume the news and content you love. Private internet access is available for Windows users, Mac OS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can use one PIA subscription to protect an unlimited amount of devices. And we've got a huge GBNews discount for you too. Click the link in this video's description and you'll get a massive 83% off PIA. That's under £2 a month, the price of a coffee, and you'll get an extra 4 months completely free on top. Also, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee too. Visit piavpn.com/GBnews to start protecting yourself digitally today.
By the way, it probably won't be enough because you'll do all these tax rises, I think a dozen different ones going on, all this extra pain, the lack of confidence, more businesses stopping to invest, more people probably moving abroad. Do you think the situation's going to get better in 12 months?
Well, James, you said all these extra taxes and increasing earning power and whatever. So when it comes to a minimum wage or whatever, those, what is it, the minimum wage and what else is another one?
National living.
National living wage. She's going to put those up. And a lot of people would say, well, that's a good thing, that's a fair thing, that's going to be good for all these low-earning people. Is it? And if so, why isn't it?
Well, I think it will, if you're in receipt of that, but it will make it less likely that businesses then hire people. And so younger people who are already struggling to get into work will find that bit more difficult. I think the big problem here, and there's sort of partly a philosophical difference, but partly I would say the kind of practical difference here, is if you tax people loads of money in all these different ways, you make them then affect the way they perform in their own lives. You try and put money in different places, it changes the way you behave. Exactly as Justin says, there's knock-on consequences. That is not something that the Treasury tends to be very good at working out why that happens. Much better for the government to spend less, to tax less, and let individuals and families and businesses make their own decisions with their own money, because they're better at doing it than even the cleverest boffin in the Treasury can ever be. And this is not the kind of socialist Labour mindset. And Rachel Reeves is, again, as Justin says, is going to get bogged down in all of these details. It's going to be all kinds of horrendous things. And unless she really changes everything she believes about her whole political philosophy and cuts all this wasteful spending and gets economic growth going and cuts taxes, which, by the way, is a massive drain on people's cost of living. The poorest people, actually, as a proportion of their income, spend more on taxes than anybody else does.
Well, that's
if she doesn't do this, it's all going to go wrong for her.
That's what's so fascinating. I mean, she's saying her core mission today is to cut the cost of living, to cut NHS waiting lists, and then the other one is cutting national debt. But if you're trying to cut back on the cost of living and then taxing people, on the other hand, I mean, how do you square that circle?
Was it Churchill said that taxing your way to prosperity is like a man standing in a bucket and trying to lift himself up by the handle? This stuff just doesn't work, and she doesn't understand it, and is now instead going around saying, oh, well, I'm tired of people mansplaining to me and not respecting me, already trying to divert on these sorts of things. The fundamentals are that we spend way too much as a country, and even the most minor bits of public spending, the Labour backbenchers are up in arms about. They tried to save, what was it, £5 billion a few years ago. It's a lot of money to you and me, but in the grand scheme of things, that's a tiny amount to be saved. They couldn't get it done, and the backbenchers, one of them came out and said, I don't understand. Well, the problem is, it's only a few billion quid, and that's the mindset that the Labour backbenchers have got. They all need to go and take at least an A-level in economics, and maybe they wouldn't be socialists afterwards.
So they're very good at spending, they're not very good at generating, Justin. How do you see the overall picture?
I'm very, very poor at the moment because it's, the underlying issue we were just sort of saying, wealth allows, increased wealth allows you to have more tax. I'm afraid if you increase tax, it does not increase wealth. It's the wrong way around. So actually focus on those areas where we can see growth. We know people are waiting to invest because they've held off investing because the budget was so late. Now, that may be relatively minor, but we've got a lot of foreign direct investment. Well, actually, amazingly, we do attract a lot of foreign direct investment, but we're already losing that. That's going elsewhere. Why? Because they don't know which way this government is going. Yes. What's the medium-term plan? We don't trust you, and you want to measure for that, go back to the bond market.
This country's being deindustrialised, though, isn't it? We're getting rid of industry. What on earth do we replace industry with?
Right. Now, here's what is one bit of good news, which, again, she should focus on. All those technology hubs around the country, all those lovely nicknames, that's Silicon Roundabout, Silicon Glen, Fen, all those. And all that basically means there's a hub of high-tech businesses. And they breed. Once they're there and they've got the right technology, even in places which are regarded as being extremely poor, like West Cornwall, you'll find little hubs there and developing, which are quite remarkable. As long as they've got the infrastructure, and that's the big issue we've got, in terms of power and also in terms of communication and good internet access, it's amazing how that can develop. And, of course, that's not London-focused. That's all over the country. We've talked before about actually some of the initiatives we've seen in Belfast and developing there, creating new businesses and new technology. And, unfortunately, these companies start, they grow, and the Americans say, that's marvellous. Why don't you come over to Silicon Valley? And we lose them. So, actually, focus on the areas where we know we're good, and we replace the old industrialised areas with that. And that was the big issue we had. When Mrs Thatcher was in power, she went through her change, whatever you think of her, she didn't replace it with anything. That was the problem. Now you have another opportunity to say, we now know what to replace it with. Now encourage that to happen. It doesn't take a lot of money. It doesn't actually take any government money. You can actually do that by way of government guarantees with enterprise investment schemes and things like that.
I want to talk to you both about centralisation, which Justin brought up there. And Justin, before we come on air, you and I were talking about the dominance of Heathrow Airport, and Heathrow was being debated again yesterday. Why the concentration of seeing the whole world revolving around Heathrow? Why haven't we got an airport in Doncaster? Why don't we expand Manchester? Why isn't Glasgow featuring more? Why is it Heathrow? Why? I mean, personally, I would find if I lived in Nottingham, for instance, I would be quite annoyed that I would have to go to Heathrow to get to anywhere in the world.
No, realistically, when you think about it, actually, we've got a lot of regional airports around them, and as long as you've got reasonable connections to them, actually, they could be, regarded as London. After all, is Luton about the same distance from London as Gatwick is? You've also got Stansted. You could even regard it as maybe Southend Airport as well. So there's no shortage of airports. It's the linkage to them, some of which is better than others. And also, originally, one of the old ideas was to put high-speed train into the West Country to allow, as you mentioned before, Bristol Airport potentially being a bigger hub. So long as you're with a reasonable connection to London, it's a sort of London airport. This country is not very big. So, unfortunately, we don't have put in that infrastructure to back it up. But the focus just on Heathrow, we all know what it's like going through Heathrow. It's a nightmare. And no matter how many more terminals you build, because the terminals may be big, but...
Just because it's a bigger nightmare.
A bigger nightmare. That's bigger shopping centres with an airport attached to it.
James, bring it back to the budget today and the potential political fallout of all of this. Do you think this is a make or break budget for the Chancellor?
Yeah, I think so, because she's not going to please terribly many people. And the people that she is going to please, the backbenchers, by some of these giveaways. So things like the lifting of the two-child benefit cap, which is very, very unpopular in the country. I would say it's a wrong thing to do, to take away money from hard-working people in taxes and give them to people who can't afford to look after their own children. Things like that will appeal...
See, that's very interesting. Have I listened to that argument coming from a Labour MP or socialist people, they're talking about child poverty. They don't talk about increasing the taxes, they talk about taking children out of poverty. And I must admit, my natural instinct is to sit there and say, hold on, let me get this straight. So you want to have 6 children and I pay for them. And if I, who going through my life, think, can I afford to have this child? Yes or no, I act upon that. But you're just having children and I'm going to have to pay for it.
Right, and well, that is the mindset, isn't it? As Mrs Thatcher, to defend her, once said, the problem with socialism is that eventually you run out of other people's money. And Rachel Reeves had long ago run out of other people's money. She's running out of the bond traders' money. They're seeing that we haven't got any reasonable expectation of paying back lots of this money. If you want to help the poorest people out, then the best way to do it is to make energy costs lower, to make food costs lower, to get people to be richer, to grow that economy, as Justin said. If you've got growth, you can do all kinds of lovely things. Without it, things get really mean as people start fighting over what crumbs we've got. And I think that's what's going to happen after the end of this budget.
Well, it's very interesting talking to you two. And, gentlemen, stay with us throughout the morning and we'll come back to you and we'll hear what people are having to say.